Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan, and in this video I'm going to show you how I painted the tropical bird of paradise. I did this on an 11 by 14 inch canvas, and I already have mine all pre-drawn on the canvas. You are welcome to use my traceable to transfer that to your canvas, or you can try to draw it. It's actually a really simple drawing. We are going to be using this 12 bright brush for the background. We're going to paint the entire background first, and you see me dipping it in the water. This is the 12 bright, and I am making sure that the drippings from the ferrule aren't going to spill down into the brush. So I have my brush wet but not dripping, and I'm going to double load it. So I'm going to load it in, this is bright aqua green and titanium white, so about equal amounts. And I didn't mix my colors on the palette because I'm going to mix it on the canvas, because the background look I'm going for is this sort of abstract looking aqua mixing with the white with different variations of lights and darks. And so I'm going to fill my entire background using the full width of the brush and turning it on the side to kind of cut in, and I want to get as close to that shape as possible. So I'm going to fill in all the area around the leaves, around the stem, and I'm going in the direction of the shape that I'm filling around it. So this is the negative space around the leaf over here, and my strokes are curving, contouring with that shape. And then in areas where you're not really close to a shape, you can kind of go in different directions. So this background is actually super relaxing to do because you don't really need to think too hard about what it's supposed to look like. It's very abstract. Your colors are blending and kind of doing their own thing. Yours is going to look different from mine. And your white might be a little lighter in some areas. You may have more aqua in some other areas. So this video is speeding up just a tad bit, but take your time. Do the best you can to go around those lines. A lot of the upper area where the blossom is, there's a lot of smaller areas in there. So make sure you use your brush on the tip of it on its side so you can get a nice crisp stroke in there. But I will say that if you do go outside or inside the lines a bit, that's okay, because that's the beauty of acrylics, is when it dries, we'll be able to paint over what we accidentally painted over. So you're just going to continue to do that. Keep contouring each shape, blending the colors, having different areas of darks and lights, making your background all expressive. I'm going to go silent here for just a bit as I finish all of this up. You see me go over some areas that I've already painted, and that's just because I want to kind of add some expressive strokes in there, maybe a bit of white that's kind of going outwards in the direction of the bloom. You don't have to do that, but I just wanted to make it a little bit more interesting by adding kind of different shades of white and aqua in different areas. And then now is a good time to paint the sides of your canvas. So when you do the sides, it's the same thing. I did not extend the leaf of my painting. I could have. You see there's a large leaf on the left side that could kind of go off on the side of the canvas. I just decided to just do the aqua and the white on all four of the sides to make it simple. And I'm just using the brush, going left and right and filling that in. Sometimes if you want to get the sides to flow a bit better, you can add a little bit of water just to speed that process up. And I guess you see that that leaf, how it could curve under the side. I could paint that green later. I didn't. I just did aqua on all 4 of the sides. And I'm adding a bit more expressive strokes in the background. The focus of this painting is really the blossom, so you don't really want to go too much into detail or worry too much about what that background looks like. Okay, we are going to do the base layer of the large leaves next. So you want to go ahead and rinse that brush off, get all that blue off, and load your palette in Brilliant Yellow Green. That's this bright lime green color. And basically, I'm going to fill in the shape of the leaf. This is, I guess, the under layer of the leaf, because if you look at the final version of this painting, the leaf is much darker. This is the base coat. This is a color that we're going to kind of see underneath that dark green, and you'll see why this is a beneficial step later. But for now, we're just going to simply paint it in solid yellow green. Just like we did with the background, you want to make sure that the direction of your strokes go in the direction of the shape that you're filling in. So these are curving with the leaf shape. Even though it's the base coat, it still kind of helps to set that foundation of the direction that the strokes are going in. And then you really want to use that tip of the brush to cut in and define that shape, because we have the area where that background is and that shape meets. We don't want any white still showing the canvas. And if that means that you need to paint a little bit over that aqua to make sure that it's really there and no white in between, you can do that. So we're doing the next leaf, and then we have a leaf that's sort of underneath this large leaf, and I'll show you how I did that when I'm done with this one. Again, the video is going a little bit faster. Press pause when you need to. And so this leaf, because I'm not doing any details here, I can technically just paint over that other leaf. I think I'm just going to paint around it. We don't want to lose the shape where the point of the leaf in the front is, so we just kind of want to make sure that we still know where the behind leaf is and where the front leaf is. Okay. We're going to make a dark turquoise color on our palette next. And so I loaded my palette in the color Phthalo Blue. And I'm going to rinse off that 12 bright brush, pat it dry, grab a little bit of bright aqua green, grab a little bit of Phthalo Blue, about equal amounts. I'd say maybe slightly more bright aqua green until we get a dark turquoise color that kind of looks like that. And that's what I'm going to paint the stem of this bird of paradise plant. So we have our stem shape and we have our bright brush, and we can use the very tip of the brush on its side to paint that thin area. If you, my stem is looking a little thick here. If you wanted it to be thinner, you can paint it thinner and then go back and add more turquoise with the background so that it's closer to that stem. But I'm just taking that tip of my brush and I'm just painting on its side, the stem, and it curves. Here's a different angle for you. So using just that tip of the brush to get in there and painting the stem. Okay, and then we can paint the little stem that kind of goes off into that back leaf. All right, and we're going to go all the way to that bottom part of the blossom, the bloom. Okay, and so we're going to extend this color. I'm still using that turquoise color I made, and I'm going to start painting this bottom part of the blossom. This is where the bottom part of the opening is of the bird of paradise. And I'm going to grab a little bit more green on my brush because I want to do a blend of green, of a more green color. So I grabbed more green on my brush and I'm adding more green at the top, and I'm going to have more blue at the bottom. So I want to blend like a gradient that's blending from a darker green color that blends to more of a blue color. So there's green at the top, it kind of blends to that dark turquoise color we made, and then it blends to more of a blue at the bottom. Also, your strokes are contouring. There's a lot of curves in this painting. Something about painting curves that makes it so relaxing. Then I want to just get in there and meticulously make sure that that line is nice and defined. I don't have any white areas of the canvas. And if you do have any large noticeable white areas of the canvas, you can always go back and add more turquoise in there to really cut in as close as possible to that shape. Okay. I'm going to add just a little bit more blue down here. I'll probably add a second. In fact, I do. I went in and I added a second coat way later on in this painting after the area dried. But I'm just going to render this blending a little bit more, adding a little bit more green on the top and blending it down into that blue color. Alright, we're going to switch gears here and go from cool colors to warm colors. And we're also going to switch our brush. We're going to be using a round brush now just because these red-orange blooms are smaller, and that round brush is going to help us get into those smaller areas. I loaded my palette with Naphthol Crimson and Primary Yellow. We're going to paint the bloom that's in the far back first, and so you can look at the drawing, there's layers of these blooms, and so we're gonna make sure that those layers are defined, but we're gonna work from the back forward. You see me load my brush in red and yellow, so I double load it in the red, and there's some yellow at the tip. It doesn't really matter which one you load first, because the red and yellow are going to blend to make an orange color. I like blending colors on the canvas, and if you want to just use your palette and blend red and yellow off the side to make kind of a darker orange, you can do that instead. But this particular bloom in the way back is kind of a dark orange red color. And you can see right away that it's not going to make a really bright orange. It's going to make a very dark orange because it's about equal amounts of red and yellow, and it's making a very dark orange because that red is such a strong color. So if you want it to be a little bit more orange, you can add some more yellow in there. You want to make sure that you cover all the white spots of your canvas, really define that shape, and see what happens if I add more yellow in there, because that red is so strong it's not really going to change it very much, but maybe just a few yellow strokes in there add a little bit of texture. Okay, so we're going to go on to our next bloom, and to make these blooms stand out, they're really different shades of red and yellow. This one's a lot more yellow, so on my palette, I'm just going to kind of wipe off that excess red that's on there and load it in just the yellow. And you can see right away how that yellow is turning very orange. And there's still red on my brush, so it's kind of a streaky yellow orange. So just painting this a solid color of that. Kind of looks like a flame with the red and the yellow kind of making an orange color. I think I like the look of that red and yellow, how it's not mixed all the way. If you wanted to mix it all the way on your palette to get it to be a solid sort of a light orange color, you can do that. I like the texture of it right here, and so I'm going to leave it that way. And then this bloom has kind of a stem that's going down into that turquoise base, and maybe I'll have it a little bit more red on the left side. You see how I left it a little bit more red, and it kind of blends to a more yellow on the right. All right, so we're going to do the next layer of bloom, and this one's a different color. I added white into the mix, titanium white. So I loaded my brush in red and white this time. I didn't rinse it off, so there might be a little bit of yellow still on my brush, and that's okay. And the whole point is to have this one be a different shade from the other one so that it would stand out. And it's one that's kind of in front of the other two. And I have this red and white combo. I'm using my brush to kind of define that shape, and it's curving, it's overlapping the other two, and it's curving, and I'm using that tip of my round brush to really define that shape, make sure I'm covering up all the white spots. And for this bloom, I'm actually going to have it be darker on the left by having a whole bunch more red on my brush. This is almost like pure Naphthol Crimson red. You can see how dark it is. And I did that simply by adding a whole bunch more red to the tip of my brush and no white as I'm loading my brush. So you can control the tint of your color when you reload it in different amounts of the red and the white. So I want it to blend from dark red to light red on this particular bloom, and grabbing a little bit more white on my brush there to blend that darker red into that lighter color. And then I can go in there and make sure that I paint the stem of that. And I'm really just working my colors here, having them blend together and adding more of that white, blending it back in, working those colors, making sure the direction of your strokes are curving with that shape. And until that you're kind of satisfied with the way it looks. Again, I want it to be lighter over on the right, and adding that white there right on the right really makes it stand out from the other, especially from that darker red one in the back, but it makes it stand out from both of the other blooms that we've already painted. I am going to brighten that yellow bloom a bit next, and so I'm going to get all that paint off my brush this time. Rinse it off, pat it dry, and I'm going to double load in yellow and white. So this is titanium white and that primary yellow. I'm going to paint just the right part of that bloom, and so that lighter yellow we get, and I'm going to blend it back into the rest of it. This is just going to lighten that up a little bit because I like that look of the lighter part over on the right, and it kind of blends to the darker part on the left. So I wanted to go for that look on each of those blooms, and that's what I did right there with that yellow. I'm going to paint the next blossom, and I'm not even going to rinse my brush. So this is a combo of red and yellow and white. It's going to make kind of a dark coral color. So I had that yellow white on my brush still, grabbed some red and sort of blending it to make it look kind of like a dark coral, almost a pink looking color. So here's a different angle for you. Same thing, contouring the strokes. I'm going to make it look dark on the left and lighter on the right side. So I'm filling that in and making sure my shape is nice and defined. I'm going to grab a little bit more white on my brush and make the right part of it a little lighter. And making that left part a little bit darker by adding a little bit more red to my brush. So we have a different shade of color for each of these blooms. Next, we're going to rinse all of that red off the brush, get it nice and clean, and wipe the ferrule. We're going to do there's a red part that's right on the very top of that base sort of part of the bloom, the greenish teal thing that we painted. So there's red. This is Naphthol Crimson, and I'm painting over it. I'm not painting a line above it. I'm painting right over it. And this red line is going to be just at the top of that sort of leaf thing. I'm sure there's a name for this part of the blossom. I don't know what it's called, but there's a base of the blossom that's kind of green, and it's where the orange parts kind of open up from it. And so that line kind of curves with it, and maybe I'll brighten it up a little bit by adding a little bit of white to the tip of my brush right there. And I'm just going to add the white in there and have it show up a little bit better, because that red against the dark color doesn't really show up unless I add some white in there. Then it'll show up nice and opaque and brighter. Then we are going to paint the blue part of the blossom. So I'm going to freshen up my phthalo blue. These are going to be a solid phthalo blue color. Get all that red off my brush, wipe the ferrule, grab that blue and paint that shape. And so this piece is coming up from the base piece, and there's kind of a curve at the top. And this is where you really want to have some good brush control, getting that paint right there at the tip of the brush, because it's a thin area to paint. Sometimes it helps to pinch your finger on the bristles to make it so that those bristles really go to a point. You can do that after loading it in the water. As you're wiping it, you can take your fingers and pinch the bristles, and then you load the bristles into just the tip part of the paint, and then that allows you to really get in there and control the small area that you're painting in. And you can see there's a little bit of a turquoise part of the background, or the white still showing, and that's okay, because I can go back later and add more turquoise to that area. And there's another blue piece I'm going to paint. Same thing, nice brush control. Get that paint right there at the tip, and then paint your curve. I'm going to have this piece kind of overlap this blossom down here, so it's going to go down, and I smudged it right there. It's going to go down to about right there. So I extended that line down. And so I added a little notch right there at the bottom. That piece, that a little triangular part you see that I just painted, that wasn't in the traceable. I just added that on there. So you can too if you like that. And so we have another part. This is another piece of that sort of opening base piece. And I am going to paint that the same color as that base piece. So I went ahead and I mixed that phthalo with that bright aqua green again, so I can get that turquoise color. And it's a very, very thin triangle piece that's kind of wider and curved at the bottom, and it goes to a point. And that point will overlap the blossom here. So hopefully that red is dry. If it's not, you may have to come back to it later. But right there, it'll overlap it, and it goes to a very, very thin point, and it kind of curves a little bit at the top. Okay, we are going to go back and finish up those large leaves, because you remember that they're darker colors and we only painted the base coat of it. We're going to go back to our 12 bright brush, and we're going to load it with the deep green permanent color. And we are going to paint the leaves the same way, only we're going to make them darker. So the direction of your strokes need to curve and go in the direction of the shape of the leaf. Because we're using a bigger brush, we can use the full width of the brush for larger areas. We can turn it on its side to really define that shape. So we kind of want a little bit of that light green showing through. This green is kind of a solid color, so you're going to see what I do. I'm going to paint it, but I'm not going to add 2 coats to it because there's going to be a little bit of subtle light green still showing through. And we are actually going to scratch out the lines of the leaf, which is going to be a really cool technique, and the whole reason why we painted the base of it bright yellow green. And so I'll do that. I'll show you how we do that in just a little bit. Just make sure that you fill it in. Again, don't worry about filling it in 100% completely solid. Also, we're going to do a little bit of highlighting in there with the leaf. Freshen your palette with some titanium white if you need to have it freshened up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to add a little bit of titanium white to my palette. I'm going to not rinse my brush. I'm going to load just a teeny tiny bit of white in there because that white takes over so fast. And adding just the subtle white over just on the right side and having it blend back in with the green. Then again, just a teeny tiny bit right there on that tip of the brush is enough to create that effect. And then we're going to turn our brush upside down and look what happened. This is so cool. It's scratching the underlayer, and then I can create the lines of the leaves. So when I'm doing this, you actually have to do it like super fast for it to be sort of affected. I guess if you tried to do it kind of slow, it would still work. But I'm drawing these lines super fast and not thinking too hard about them. So when you're scratching your leaf, the under part, the under layer color showing through. And it only works if that dark green is not dry. So you got to do this before that dark green layer dries. And then I went back in and I really liked that look of that light, the white in there. So I added just a tiny bit more highlight in that white. So I'll demonstrate this again because I know that went super fast. The part that I scratched, I'll slow it down the second time around. But so I'm going to do this next leaf. This is the leaf that's behind, and I'm going to paint it. I'm going to pretend like it's in front for a little bit, and then I'm going to make the other leaf in front. So I'm painting this one. There's still white on my brush, so actually that green went in there and sort of blended with that white, and that was okay. So same thing again, painting that green leaf, direction of the strokes, grabbing a teeny tiny bit of white on there and making that right side just a tiny bit lighter. And then when I do the scratching part, I'll slow it down to show you how I'm doing that. So you're using the other side of your brush to scratch, and you're drawing your line so that it curves. I guess a fair amount of pressure on it creates that scratch, and then your lines of your leaf are curving outwards. Okay, this is kind of slow motion. When I'm doing this in real life, I'm doing it pretty fast. And then do the curves of your leaf that kind of scratch outwards. Okay, so very cool technique. All right, if we remember, this other leaf is in front of that back leaf. So I'm going to paint it like it is in front of it. I lost the tip of my leaf line, but that's okay. I can kind of redefine it again. So this green and white combo again, where it's a little bit lighter on the right. It blends to the green on the left. Your strokes are contouring in the shape of the leaf, and I decided to add a little bit of bright yellow green in there because my leaf is overlapping, getting it to be slightly darker or a slightly different color. Like right here, I'm using more of that darker green right there at the edge. It really makes it look like it's overlapping it right there. And then my lines for my leaf again, making a line that's curved, and then doing your diagonal lines for the leaf. Okay, What I'm doing next is I'm going in back with my bright aqua green and white, the same colors I used for the background, and I'm using a round brush this time. I'm just going in wherever I see any sort of leftover white canvas showing. You really don't notice it on the camera where it is, but I see it in person. So I'm just going in there and touching up different areas where I feel like it just needs a little bit more background as close as possible to that bloom in the leaf. And so that's what I'm doing. And then I'm going to go back in here to some of these blooms and sort of add a second layer. This piece right here, that the left part of the opening piece, I added a little bit more white on the base just because I wanted it to stand out a bit more. So just a teeny bit of white there on the base, and I'm blending it back with that sort of green turquoise color that it is. And then so I'm going to rinse my brush, and I just want to add some more color. I really like how the right part of these have sort of a lighter color in there. So I wanted to go back in with the red and white on this one and kind of brighten up the right part of it a bit. And I did that with this one with some more yellow and white. And I did it with this one with the yellow, white, and red combo. And I ended up making it too lighter. So I had to go back in there, blend my colors again, and re-blend it in there. And then this one, I wanted it to have a little bit more red over here on the left. And then the base of that bloom, I wanted it to be more bluish on the bottom of it. So I went back in there. I'm using my bright brush for this. So this is just pure phthalo blue. And so I'm just adding that blue right there on the bottom, blending it back up into that turquoise, and then back up into that greenish color. And then with my round brush in blue and white, just a teeny bit of white in there mixed with some blue, I'm adding just a subtle white sort of curved highlight there on the bottom. Adds that just an extra touch to that piece right there. And so that's it. This is the conclusion of my Bird of Paradise painting. I hope that you enjoyed painting with me too. Super relaxing. I enjoyed this one a lot. Thanks for painting with me.